Government shutdown consequences, annoying and unsettled. Flight cancellations multiply while food assistance, snarled all week in court, will be released. One of Tuesday's biggest winners, New Jersey Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill talks to Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan, and we have a preview. Nancy Pelosi made history as House Speaker twice. Now she's bowing out. We check in with Shoykat Chakrabarti, one of the Democrats vying to replace her. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Tonight, we will try to quantify the cost of stagnancy. Shutdown talking points have long since grown stagnant, but the costs, the pain felt by Americans trying to travel, trying to eat, trying to make ends meet, have become ever more visible. At this hour, and this number I'm about to give you will only increase, 1,400 commercial flights have been canceled. Today, the FAA required a 4% cut in allowable flights at 40 of the nation's busiest airports due to the shortage of air traffic controllers. These mandatory reductions in flight capacity are spreading across the country. The biggest effects so far noticeable at Newark International, Atlanta's Jackson Hartsfield, and San Francisco International Airports. But you know as well as I do, the ripples are coming, and if, as projected, these scheduled cutbacks reach 10% early next week, that could mean thousands upon thousands of daily flight cancellations, mangling not only air travel, but, of course, gumming up train, bus, and car travel as well. And what about federal food aid known as Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, or SNAP? There has been a ton of legal wrangling with this, and the administration saying it couldn't use backup funds to provide it, even though it has used backup funds to pay troops and federal law enforcement during this shutdown. Late today, responding to a federal court order, the Agriculture Department said it will release full SNAP funding. Last year, 42 million Americans, roughly 12% of our population, received SNAP benefits at a cost of about $100 billion. The average benefit, $187 per person, $332 per household, or put another way, $6 per day. 60% of recipients are either under the age of 18 or over the age of 60. 19% of all households with children receive SNAP benefits. 40% of households led by a single mother. Again, that 42 million number, Americans currently receiving these benefits. In 2007, that number was 26 million. That was the year before the Great Recession. SNAP participation exploded after the Great Recession, rising to 33 million in 2009, 40 million in 2010. And it's around that 40 million number participation has hovered around ever since. States determine eligibility, and 5 of the 7 most competitive states that President Trump won in last year's election, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, are all at or very near the median rate of SNAP participation. SNAP, therefore, quite evidently, is not a Republican or Democratic program, but a vital nutritional lifeline. And uncertainty around it only deepens poverty's grinding reality. All these costs, tabulated in travel and dinner table pain, shutdown induced. There were efforts at the margins to end the shutdown today, but they appeared as fruitless as those that came before. And tempers are flaring. This is the Senate Majority Leader after a failed effort to move a bill to pay federal workers.
So in other words, we're going to keep federal employees hostage. So they might get paid for back pay, but starting tomorrow, they're not going to get paid again. And that means that in the future, they continue to be pawns. They continue to get held hostage.
And this is Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro on SNAP benefits, the Trump administration, and Vice President J.D. Vance.
And folks got to wake up and realize the people who are leading in America quite literally want to keep people hungry. And you'll excuse me for getting emotional about it, but when I see hungry people in my state who are hungry because of J.D. Vance's politics, that makes me angry.
With those anger management issues duly noted, we start tonight with canceled flights and a chaotic weekend ahead. Karen Wise at Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston. Karen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Major, good to be with you. As you can tell, it's pretty calm on the outside right now, but unfortunately, the FAA says Houston Bush, along with several major Texas airports, Chicago, San Francisco, D.C., that whole domino effect, they're starting to see ground delays now due to understaffing.
I want to play for you and our audience, Karen, sound from CBS Mornings with the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Let's please play that.
You say it was based on the data. People are real curious about that data. Can you share the numbers? What set off the alarm bells?
Yeah, so first, I have a lot of jobs at DOT. My number one job is safety. And so we had seen the rolling staffing triggers that come from air traffic controllers. One day it was in LA, another day it was in New York, Minneapolis, Atlanta. And so as we were looking at the data, we were seeing increased numbers in some of the categories we don't like.
So, Karen, this is going to continue through the weekend. The Transportation Secretary said these mandatory requirements to reduce capacity will begin and continue to flow through the system throughout the weekend. What does that look like and feel like there?
Yeah, Major. So basically, right now, airlines have canceled less than 4% of flights. They're trying to ease into these cuts. But as we go into next week, about 10% of flights are going to be canceled. We don't know how long this is going to last for. Airlines say they're trying their best to mitigate the impact to as many passengers as possible. They're starting by cutting these smaller regional flights with fewer passengers. They're trying not to touch these long-haul international flights. For now, they are refunding everyone for cancellations, and they're also offering these waivers for people who voluntarily decide they don't want to travel during this hectic, chaotic time. So airlines are trying to stay on board, but there is this balance between what exactly the FAA wants and those numbers Secretary Duffy mentioned. He didn't really give specifics.
Karen Waugh, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. We turn now to Caitlin Huey-Burns on Capitol Hill. Caitlin, catch us up. Where do things stand?
Well, Major, today this has all felt like running on a treadmill, having some movement, but really going nowhere at this point. Earlier today, we saw Chuck Schumer take to the Senate floor and say, look, we're willing to open up the government in exchange for a one-year extension on those Obamacare subsidies that have been at the heart of the Democrats' opposition to this government funding bill in the first place. He had all of his caucus behind him, physically present in the Senate to unveil this proposal. I can tell you, though, that is a non-starter when it comes to Senate Republicans. They have told us as such. One even called it political terrorism, and another said that this proposal was the dumbest idea he'd ever heard. Republicans' position is vote to open the government, and then we'll negotiate on health care. So we're still at an impasse here. The difference between this Friday and Friday's past, Major, is that the Senate is actually planning to stick around through the weekend to actually work on this. The president, as we've seen, has been pushing them to find some kind of way out of this. And if not, he's been pushing them even more aggressively to end the filibuster. But as of right now, there are still not enough votes among Republicans to do that. So remaining at an impasse heading into the weekend with all of these headlines that we've been talking about really coming to bear.
Caitlin, you mentioned the filibuster. I wonder, in your conversations with Senate Democrats, do any of them harbor any anxiety that Republicans might crack on that and they might see Republicans actually end the filibuster to end the shutdown?
Not at this point, Major, but that is always kind of in the background of concern for both parties, because whenever this has been brought up, and it's been brought up in previous years as well, previous Congresses as well, both institutionalists say that, from both sides, say that, it's about preserving the Senate. And if another party takes control, that will be detrimental for us. But the difference here is, Major, that you do have the president starting to become more aggressive in lobbying lawmakers. And we've started to hear from some institutionalist senators like John Cornyn and others say, well, maybe we can start talking about the idea of certain carve-outs for certain legislation. So we're still far off from that. But the idea is that the president wants this to be over no matter how it's done.
It's a real pressure point and one to bear watching, and I know you will. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so very much. New Jersey Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill's transition is underway. She named several senior advisors, including her chief of staff. Sherrill sat down with our Margaret Brennan. Here is some of their conversation.
You said on CNN this past week that there's a feeling working people have not been heard and that there's too much caution and mediocrity in the Democratic Party today. What did you mean by that?
That as I was talking to people across the state, thousands of people, they wanted to see an agenda to get their costs down and something that was going to take place quickly. As I said, I'm not writing a strongly worded letter. I'm not doing a 10-year plan. I'm on day one declaring a state of emergency. Not just because I'm furious that, as too many people have failed New Jersey ratepayers, that the costs are being dumped on them. Yes, that is a huge problem for me that I'm addressing. But it also, I think, conveys that sense of urgency that I feel to work for the people of New Jersey so that they know that this is a day one issue for me. They also want to see somebody, though, that has their backs because they know that these tariffs are raising costs. They know that the one big beautiful bill is going to take away their health care. They know that attacks on the Gateway Tunnel project are going to raise costs here and really cut into job opportunities. So they want to know that whoever's governing is going to be focused on governing for them, not a party of one like Donald Trump.
Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan joins me now here at the Family Desk. Margaret, always great to have you with us. Mikey Sherrill, the governor-elect, talked about urgency, but she also knows she's going to have to deliver results.
Right. Well, that's going to be the transition from being a lawmaker in Washington to being an executive of a state. And it's interesting because she still has that lawmaker role right now as representative. And we pressed her on a number of things, including the shutdown that's happening now. She will inherit whatever long-term effects there are on her residents in the state of New Jersey, but she's still holding the party line saying this is what the voters want, to see Democrats really defend this issue of health care. And you heard her speak more broadly for her party, the kind of messages that she thinks Democrats should be driving home, like they're worried about the prices Americans are paying.
In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee, now governor-elect, she will also be on Face the Nation.
She will. We have these two governors in waiting, and it's interesting to have both of them on. And the common thread here seems to be affordability, something the president today, when he was talking, said this was a con job by Democrats because he's taking care of the affordability issue. I think this is always the thing that plagues any candidate, no matter what country you're talking about. It's the kitchen table and what people face when it comes to putting the price of their meals together, or what they pay. For example, in New Jersey, what Governor-elect Sherrill was talking about there, energy. It's up nearly 20%, those utility costs in her state versus 6% nationwide. So that's why that was that number one thing for her agenda, because people know what they pay every single month. And it's going to be hard to combat a lot of these things.
And the backlash for President Trump is during the campaign, he promised to lower prices on day one. Spanberger and Sherrill have also made promises to address those things on day one. It's a great campaign slogan.
But then you got to act.
But you've got to act. And if you don't, the backlash can be sometimes swift, as we saw in this 2025 election cycle. Margaret Brennan, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. You can watch more of Margaret's interview with Mikey Sherrill and her interview with Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger on Face the Nation at 10:30 a.m. on CBS and right here on CBS News 24/7, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Flights delayed, meals missed, pay paused. Maryland Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey on the effects being felt as the shutdown reaches the ripe old age of 38 days old. Plus, top Trump ally Congresswoman Elise Stefanik throws her name in the race for New York governor against Democratic incumbent Kathy Hochul. Look at that race with our political panel. And the cost of Sudan's 2-plus-year-long civil war. Famine taking grip of the country. Humanitarian aid trying to reach those in desperate need. It is a complicated process. We will explore all of it. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Longest government shutdown in U.S. history. The House of Representatives, well, it's not going to convene next week. That will be its 8th week out of session. Maryland Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey joins me now. Congressman, it's good to see you. No House of Representatives in next week. That will be the 8th week, as I just said. First of all, your reaction to that?
It's pretty pathetic. And if you go back to July 25th, the House Republicans haven't had us in session except for 12 days since July 25th. So they've been absent without leave instead of being here on Capitol Hill doing their job. I don't agree with the Senate Republicans, but at least they've been here trying to work something out with the Senate Democrats in a good faith effort. But, Johnson passed their bill on a party line vote. He knew it was going to be dead on arrival in the Senate, but they've been in hiding ever since. So hopefully they'll come back so we can get to work.
Speaking of the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, as you well know, offered a plan today, a one-year continuing resolution at current funding levels and a one-year extension of Obamacare subsidies put in place during COVID. Do you support that?
Well, I was open to it. I thought it was a good faith effort that he proposed there, but I was quite surprised by the sort of strength of the Senate Republican response. Your reporters just covered it a few minutes ago and talked about, it's the stupidest thing I ever heard and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm surprised that they would make those kinds of statements. But, at the end of the day, look, I think it's important for us to make sure that we continue to press to reopen the government. Senate and House Democrats also think it's important, though, to make sure that we help people get some kind of health care coverage. The refusal to extend the Affordable Care Tax credits means that millions of Americans could lose their health care coverage because their premiums are going to double or triple or maybe even quadruple. So we think that's the wrong result. We think it really compounds the problem with the $1 trillion cut to Medicaid that the Republicans put through as well. We think it's important for, Americans to have both health care coverage and get the government reopened.
Congressman, let me challenge you for a moment on that, because the Republicans make what appears to many people who email and text me about this in our audience a valid argument. In the past, when it's been a continuing resolution that has no strings attached to it, just at current funding levels, both sides have generally historically agreed to that. And they say, if you agree to that, we will negotiate in good faith on this question of health care. Why can't you do it in that sequence? Reopen the government and then negotiate.
Well, just a couple quick steps back. We had a CR that came out in December that not only did Biden agree to, but Trump agreed to it, and you had a bipartisan vote that got it done. They didn't go back to that one. They went to the one in March where I think only 3 House Democrats, the other 212 or so, voted against the CR that they now want us to eat again. I'm not sure why they think we should swallow that. The other problem, too, though, is the health care piece. During the last 6 months, since we had the vote in March on the CR, they passed the quote-unquote big ugly bill that cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid. And then on top of that, they refused to extend the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. And we just talked about the problem that creates. So if they're not willing to negotiate with it then, because we were offering amendments to try and address it previously, why should we assume that they're actually going to, negotiate in good faith now? And I just one last point on that. If they really were willing to negotiate on it, why don't they do it now? I mean, the argument they made was we don't have enough time to do it. That was 7 weeks ago. We could have figured something out in the past 7 weeks. If they'd actually been here, House Republicans have not, trying to work something out in good faith, and a little support from the Trump administration would be helpful on that front, too. But they've been absent without leave. They threw the bill on the table and said, my way or the highway. Then they went into hiding ever since. So I don't know why people think that demonstrates good faith efforts to negotiate. I think it clearly demonstrates the opposite.
Very quickly, Congressman, I want you to wade into redistricting fever, which has now reached Maryland. Your Governor Wes Moore announced today the creation of a commission to redistrict the lines in Maryland, even though the state Democratic Senate President Bill Ferguson has said that ought not to happen. Who's right?
Well, I support the redistricting. I think we found ourselves in this position, unfortunately, because President Trump decided he wanted to do this mid-decade redistricting effort. I think because he realizes he's about to lose the House majority on a straight-up vote. So he wants to try and put his thumb on the scale. So he called Governor Abbott in Texas, said, give me 5 more House seats. That's how we got on this path. So I think it's important for Democrats to fight fire with fire. Don't forget that in 2024, they took away 3 Democratic seats in North Carolina. That's the reason Democrats aren't in the majority in the House. I don't see any reason why we think that should happen again. I think it's important for us to make sure we fight back and make sure that we have an even level playing field in the competition to gain the majority of the House of Representatives.
Maryland Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the ballot box to the courtroom, Republicans file a lawsuit in a bid to block California's new, wait for it, congressional map. More on redistricting battles next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. We're going to be here for a while in the show. I'm happy to say that. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. The number of detainees in ICE custody now a record 66,000. This according to Homeland Security data first obtained by CBS News. That number is up nearly 70%, or about 39,000 people from the start of President Trump's second term. Never before has ICE held so many people facing deportation at any given time. That according to officials, historical data, and immigration policy experts. 3 people have been killed in the latest U.S. military strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth released this aerial footage of Thursday's attack. The campaign, which began in late September, has now destroyed at least 18 vessels and killed at least 70 people. Governments and families of many of those killed in these strikes have said most of the dead, civilians, primarily fishermen. California Republicans have sued to block the state from redrawing its congressional map to favor Democrats. This lawsuit announced just hours after California voters overwhelmingly approved, you see the numbers there, the redrawn districts in a special election Tuesday. David Becker joins me now, CBS News election law expert. He's also the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research and the co-author of a very fine book called The Big Truth. You somewhat might recall the name of the other co-author. Anyway, catch us up on what this lawsuit says in California and its legal merits or demerits.
Well, first of all, the Republicans have tried to stop this before Prop 50 went on the ballot earlier this week, and they lost every single case. They even lost a case that was filed by a Republican member of Congress from Texas seeking to stop it, somewhat ironically. This is a new lawsuit. Now that it's passed, it's ripe. And what they're alleging is that race predominated in drawing these districts. I think this isn't a frivolous case, but I think it's going to be a very tough case for the Republicans to win. It's very clear that the primary motive, if not the sole motive of this redistricting plan, was partisan advantage. And while the Supreme Court has said in the past they don't really like the idea of these extreme partisan gerrymanders, they've kind of washed their hands and said there's nothing they can do about it. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot they could do about it if they chose to do so. But as long as they don't, I think we're going to continue to see this partisan tit for tat play out, where each party thinks the only way to stop the other party from drawing these extreme gerrymanders is to draw their own. And ultimately, that mutually assured destruction will bring both to the table and to try to stop that. I don't know if they're right or wrong, but in the meantime, the real losers are the voters who are going to find themselves in districts they're not familiar with. Right. Not knowing who the candidates are, and this might happen every 2 years.
You heard in our previous segment, Glenn Ivey, Democrat from Maryland. Maryland is now going to jump into this. The current congressional representation in Maryland, 8 Democrats, 1 Republican. So of the 9, Democrats hold 8. If they redraw the line and get rid of that Republican one, it'll be 9-0.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the place where these extreme partisan gerrymanders are most likely to occur, where one-party rule is pretty strong in some of these states. Maryland has that, others have that. But on the other hand, that often means, you know, if it's a state like Indiana, or there's only a couple of seats at the most that could be gained. But given that the margins in the House are so narrow right now, it appears the parties are going to fight tooth and nail for every single last seat. And again, at the expense of the voters, where you know, it's hard enough to manage the every decennial redistricting where you might be placed in a new district, and for the next 5 elections in Congress, you're going to have to be in that district. Now we're getting to the point where we might be seeing literally every 2 years these districts redrawn. Election officials in California right now are busy trying to, as soon as this election is certified, they're going to be doing the hard work of making sure that those new districts will be in place for an election where the primaries are going to happen early next year.
Very quickly, about 40 seconds. Everything went pretty well and smoothly on Tuesday, but yet election denialism continues to persist.
It's incredible. We're still seeing grifters, conspiracy theorists spreading rumors about the election, applying this really dime store mathematics to saying turnout went up or someone did better than the last election. That's why we hold elections, because people choose differently in different elections based on the situation in the country, and especially when they're unhappy, they can turn out in very, very high numbers. We have paper ballots. Those paper ballots are all connected to voters who have been registered using ID as they have to under federal law. We know that the elections are secure, and we know what the outcomes are.
And the civil servants and election officials, they're the constant in all this. They make it work, regardless of the noise.
And they did a remarkable job this week, and we should all give them all a hand.
David Becker, as always, pleasure, sir.
Thanks, Major.
Who will replace Nancy Pelosi after she leaves Congress in 2027? Might not be the biggest question on your mind, but it's one of our questions. One of the contenders, Shrikat Chakrabarti. He joins me next right here on the Takeout. You see him smiling right there. We'll talk to him after the break.
And tonight I have the high privilege and distinct honor of my own as the first president to begin the State of the Union message with these words: Madam Speaker.
That was George W. Bush during his 2007 State of the Union address congratulating Nancy Pelosi on becoming the first female Speaker of the House. Pelosi announced yesterday she will not run for re-election after 20 terms in Congress. She led Democrats in the House, created huge legislative victories, dealt with dissenters, dealt with those who were strong advocates of progressive politics, a lot of things. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Pelosi will go down as the greatest speaker of all time. Shrikat Chakrabarti joins me now. He is running for Nancy Pelosi's congressional seat. He also served as Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff. Shrikat, it's always good to see you. Look, you were the first one to jump into this race because this program thrives on breaking political news. Moments before we started talking to you, London Breed, former mayor of San Francisco, told Politico today, the story just posted, that she is strongly considering entering that race. Your reaction?
Look, it doesn't really change the reason I'm in this race and why I've been running for the last 10 months. At the end of the day, I jumped in this race because I really believe we need a Democratic Party that has leaders that have the courage to stand up to Trump right now, who are willing to use every tool at our disposal to stop what I see as an authoritarian coup going on in front of our eyes. But beyond that, we actually need a plan and a vision to actually improve people's lives. Because ultimately, the American dream has been shattered. It's been crumbling for decades. People are working longer hours to afford less and less. If we can't turn that around, I think we're going to keep getting strongmen into power. And that hasn't changed. And I'm not calling for me to just win this one race. I have been talking about trying to recruit people to run all across the Democratic Party. I think we need a whole new generation of leaders. I think we need dozens, not hundreds of people running all across the country. And I plan to keep doing that.
Assess for my audience what you believe history will say about Nancy Pelosi.
Look, Nancy Pelosi is going to go down as one of the greatest speakers in history, up there with people like Sam Rayburn. And I think when you actually look at her career, and if you watch her retirement video, I thought it was beautiful. It was a very touching video. It was a love letter to San Francisco. And it really made this point about how San Francisco has always been synonymous with the future. And that's not just because we have a tech industry here. San Francisco's always been the city that pushes to fix what the country's getting wrong. And that's, the legacy of all the movements we've had in our city, whether it's the disability rights movement, the gay rights movement, the sanctuary city policies. A lot of that stuff started right here in San Francisco. And Nancy Pelosi, when she first went into the House, she was this fearless voice that was calling attention to this national AIDS epidemic that was ravaging our city, and she got action. So her ability to take actual progressive pushing and turn it into real legislation, I think that's going to be a real legacy. I think her willingness to step down is also a huge act of leadership. It's something that's all too rare in Washington, and it ensures that her career is going to be remembered for all of her accomplishments, not for her just being in there for too long.
Yeah, but you announced, Shrikat, before that was clear, and that meant you believed it was time for her to go one way or the other. So maybe she stayed longer than she should have?
Well, I've been clear from the start that I have a lot of respect for her career, but I do think we're in a new moment for the Democratic Party. We've got a new crisis right now, which is a cost of living crisis. In my city here in San Francisco, we face it hardest. I think we actually do need a legislator who's going to push the bounds of what's possible there again, right? I think we need to be actually tackling these big structural issues, things like healthcare, the cost of housing, the cost of education, the cost of childcare. We got to do that at a national level. And we have to do the big structural fixes because it's come to a breaking point now, not just for me, but for everybody living in this country. So I call for things like a single payer healthcare system that will guarantee healthcare to everybody because every developed nation in the world has it, and we're the richest country in the world. I also call for putting our country on a mission to actually rebuild our manufacturing, rebuild our industries, create middle class and working class jobs again at a mass scale. Ultimately, I believe the big job ahead of us right now is to prove that democracy can work to improve your lives. Because if we can't do that, I think we're going to keep seeing authoritarians come into power. And I really feel I'm instructed by what I've seen in our own past. Because there was a far-right movement back in the 1930s that was extremely powerful. It was filling Madison Square Garden with these huge Nazi rallies. And the way we defeated that movement was FDR came in with a whole new movement, with the New Deal movement, and then through the New Deal and the mobilization for World War II, he used democracy to improve people's lives so dramatically. It just laid to rest this idea that you need an authoritarian to do it for you. So that's, I think, the moment we're at right now. I think we need new ideas, we need new leaders, we need a new kind of energy. And that's why I was running, and that's the kind of energy I'm trying to bring to the Democratic Party.
It's going to be a crowded primary. It may include London Breed, the former mayor of San Francisco. Shaukat Chakrabarty, I appreciate your time. Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Major.
The United Nations has called it one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century. The civil war in Sudan is what it's talking about. There's a U.S. push for peace. It's been largely ignored. There are lots of complications and humanitarian issues. We're going to delve into all of that right here next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. What we're about to talk about next might be the most undercovered story of human misery on planet Earth. The United States is trying to get peace in Sudan. The civil war continues to rage as we speak. Explosions were heard today in the nation's capital, just a day after the country's paramilitary forces agreed, momentarily obviously, to a U.S.-backed humanitarian truce. Over the last 2.5 years, here's what I was driving at. More than 150,000 people have been killed, some 12 million displaced, half of them children, following the country's coup in 2021. I want to bring in Katie Crosby, Senior Director of U.S. Policy and Advocacy for Mercy Corps, provides humanitarian assistance in regions in crisis, and that most definitely includes Sudan. Katie, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Explain to my audience what's going on and what you're trying to do to help it out.
So as you mentioned, we've seen a civil conflict in Sudan over the last 2+ years. And throughout that conflict, more than 30 million people are now in need of humanitarian aid within the country of Sudan. This has crossed lines time and time again across all 18 states that are within Sudan. As you've mentioned, we've seen incredible displacement, people being forced to flee from their homes, many of them multiple times. So just when they thought that they were safe, they would have to flee again. And what's been incredibly challenging is the violence that we have seen, the siege tactics that have been used, and the deliberate obstruction of aid from being allowed to get into Sudan and throughout to Sudan to the people who need it the most.
How does that get in any way addressed or redressed? Getting aid in and assisting those who've been displaced, facing famine and worse.
So as you mentioned, there is a ceasefire deal on the table that we are hopeful about, and certainly any attempts to broker a ceasefire deal that all parties agree to is critical, and that needs to go from words to deeds. Even now, as we have seen this progress towards a potential ceasefire, at the same time, we've still seen drone strikes on civilian populations across the country. And so it can't just be words on a page or a partial agreement. There needs to be an immediate ending of the violence on the ground so that we can surge in the humanitarian aid that is so badly needed. And most of this aid is really being provided through local groups, soup kitchens, volunteers. They have really been the backbone of this response, especially in the hardest to reach places, the places where the lines of conflict have just not enabled either people or aid to get in.
There's a place called Al-Fashar. Where is it? What is it? And what's going on there? And what has you most worried?
So Al-Fashar is a city in the state of Darfur. And over the last 500 days, it has been under siege by the RSF, one side of the conflict. They have been shelling it with mortars. They have cut off all aid. Food has not been allowed in. Water has been cut off.
A straight-up siege. Nothing
just absolute
just
siege.
bombardment.
Just, I mean, medieval-style siege. And we saw that after over a year, this city has fallen. So RSF forces have come in, and people who are left in Al-Fashar now have to face another decision of whether to flee or whether to stay. And so many are trying to flee. We have seen horrific reports of mass killings, of men and boys being separated from women and children. And even the actual cost of trying to flee can be up to $500 per person just to get a seat on a truck or a donkey ride for part of the way.
And to be clear, they don't have $500.
They do not have $500. Not at all. Not even close. And as a result of that, some people have been held for ransom. They've been robbed on their way trying to leave Al-Fashar. One of our colleagues walked for 7 days trying to get to a safer place, literally counting bodies along the road that he was traveling on. And he was robbed. He was taken. All of his earthly possessions that he was still able to hold on to were taken from him before he showed up in a safer place.
Katie Crosby, I appreciate you coming in and letting us know about this. We're going to continue to keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Our political panel, waiting in the wings. We have wings here. I didn't even know that, but they're waiting there, apparently, to break down this week's biggest political stories. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. To the surprise of absolutely no one, New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik announced her bid for governor, what could be one of the tightest, most expensive races in the 2026 election cycle. In her launch video, Stefanik called current New York Governor Kathy Hochul the worst governor in America. Governor responded, calling Stefanik President Trump's, quote, #1 cheerleader in Congress. I want to bring in our political panel Democratic strategist Jonathan Cott, who served as a senior advisor, Senators Joe Manchin and Chris Coons, and Republican strategist Lance Trover, who was Doug Burgum's spokesman during his White House bid in 2024. Gentlemen, good to see you. Remember, the candy doesn't eat itself, so get in there as often as you want. New York, Kathy Hochul, Elise Stefanik, that's going to be a brawl.
Oh, heck yeah. And I love it because Kathy Hochul wanted Mamdani, and she's got him. And now she's going to have to help deliver on all these crazy socialist policies that he promised. So is she going to do it? That's going to be the big question.
Do you think there is any possibility that before that race is over, both Kathy Hochul and Elise Stefanik are running ads against Zoran Mamdani?
I mean, it's anything's possible in this political world. But yeah, she went
because she's against the tax increases at the state level that would have to go through to finance some of what Mamdani has promised.
Yeah, absolutely. But she went all in on this guy because she didn't want a primary, right? But now she's going to have to go to Albany and deliver, and she's going to have to go to Albany and deliver what it is he wants. And so is she going to upset the quote unquote Mamdani wing of the party now? That's the big question for Kathy Hochul.
Jonathan, that's yours. You're the Mamdani wing of the party, right? With Chris Coons and Joe Manchin. So please explain how this is all going to go down.
Look, she made a calculation. She didn't want a primary challenge. She endorsed him. If his policies work and she can get him through, she's going to smooth sail in 2026. If they don't, she's going to have a hard time explaining them.
Do you think she looks, that is to say Kathy Hochul, at the results Tuesday for Spanberger in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, Democratic nominee in New Jersey, and say, wait a minute, the wind might be at my sails.
I think she should. I think she should look at that and say voters liked bipartisan pragmatists who had a record of accomplishments. Now, she's got a year to follow through on that, but she's also got to work with Mamdani to get some of his stuff done. I don't know if she can get all of it done. I don't think anybody could get all of what he wants done in a year. She's going to have to get one or two of those things done, or the progressives are going to turn on her, and her hope of not getting a primary is out the window.
This is going to be an incredible race. I mean, Lee Zeldin only lost by like 5 points, I think, in the last election. Right. So I think this is going to be really one to watch for next year.
So in my audience, you might not know the name Carrie Coiner. To be honest with you, I didn't know it until about 3 or 4 hours ago. Member of the Virginia House of Delegates, a Republican. Why am I interested in Carrie Coiner? Because she's the one who leaked the text messages about Jay Jones threatening violence against a Republican in the House of Delegates that roiled the Virginia governor's race and the Virginia Attorney General's race for 7 weeks. Why do I bring up her name? Because she ran for re-election. She lost by 5 points. So the person who brought this to the public attention that was debated for weeks upon weeks in the Commonwealth of Virginia is the only casualty. Jay Jones won by 5 points against Jason Miyares, the incumbent and a pretty strong, stout political figure in his own right.
Yeah.
Question to you, gentlemen. Is there anything left that is truly scandalous in American politics?
I mean, I think that's a valid question. I mean, those texts that we saw from him were beyond horrific.
6 years ago, they are straight up bipartisan consensus disqualifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And he won by 5 points. I don't know if there is a political scandal left in this country. I mean,
Jonathan,
defer to Jonathan.
I think you have some perspective on this that might be valuable.
I worked for Anthony Weiner. I'm going to say that scandal might still disqualify you, but other than that one,
look it up, kids, on your Google machine if you don't remember.
Loosen my tie for
there we
this,
go.
but,
Jonathan, do it.
But other than that, I don't think there's a political scandal that can wipe you out. I think Donald Trump actually paved the way for that.
And the reason this fascinates me is everyone said it was a legitimate issue. Now, Democrats said, leave it to the voters to decide if that's disqualifying. But they didn't say it was illegitimate to bring it up or it was dirty tricks or some sort of smear campaign. They were legit texts. He did it. She brought them to the surface, and she's the one who suffers politically.
Well, look, and newsflash to you, all political operatives out there. I mean, what does that say to you? That if you've got a candidate that's in trouble politically, get the party to rally around you. That's the one thing they did. They never
circled
the wagons. They circled the wagons.
Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah. Never resign. Never resign.
Never resign.
What else are your takeaways?
Did you that, or is that
what, Jonathan,
I did
Jonathan, how do you explain to Democrats who might ask you, what does Zoran Mamdani mean for the future of the Democratic Party? What's your answer to that question?
It means he is an exciting, charismatic, far-left wing of the party that had a great message.
That won one race in one jurisdiction.
Yep.
And it's got no more importance than that.
If it had more importance than that, we'd be talking about President de Blasio, President Giuliani, President Bloomberg. We're not.
We're not.
There's a little bit of a contradiction there. You're saying he's got this following, yet it's just restricted to New York. I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, you look at how the Democratic Party is going in this country. It is moving and skewing further and further left. Their leaders right now, AOC, a socialist, Mamdani, a socialist, Bernie Sanders, a socialist. That's where the direction of the Democratic Party is headed. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's just constrained to one city.
I would just point out, Bernie Sanders, no candidate that he has ever endorsed has ever won in a purple or red district. Bernie Sanders...
Meaning in a competitive place.
In a competitive place. Bernie Sanders doesn't represent the majority of the party. Abigail Spanberger, Ruben Gallego, people like that represent it. Those people on the left are a fringe. They represent the far left of our party. They get excited. They talk a lot on Twitter. They get a lot of attention. They're not the majority of our party.
They obviously go vote.
Jonathan, I'm going to give you 30 seconds because I name-checked who you work for. Joe Manchin, Chris Coons, institutionalist boast in the Democratic Senatorial Caucus. The filibuster is now being pressurized by President Trump. What is your message about the filibuster and what should be done to it or about it?
I think my Democratic friends are probably happy they didn't get rid of the filibuster last time.
Who helped them not get rid of it?
Joe Manchin isn't taking a victory lap, but look, when you don't have the minority views represented, then it's just majority rule. And when bipartisanship doesn't happen in the Senate, it doesn't work.
Jonathan Lance Trover, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Happy Friday, everyone. This is The Takeout.